The calories in, calories out model, it has its place in our society's mind, but just because people are eating too much and moving too little doesn't just mean reversing that and eating less and moving more is the solution. They've set themselves up to be insulin resistant. They've set themselves up to be leptin resistant. And these, as I mentioned, have an effect on other hormones. So you'll see a lot of people hypothyroid. So we need to address how to become metabolically healthy again.
Welcome to the Calorie Conundrum Podcast with Coach Strick. Join us as we expand the weight loss conversation to beyond just calories and dare to ask the question, why does eating less and exercising more sometimes not produce the desired results? Here's Coach Strick to discuss this Calorie Conundrum.
Well, hello everyone, this is Coach Strick, and on today's podcast, I sat down with Dr. Jerome Craig. Dr. Jerome has studied the different aspects of the human body for many years. His studies include being a personal trainer, a massage therapist, a chiropractor, a college instructor of anatomy, and most recently, a certified functional medicine practitioner. Dr. Jerome understands that health and weight loss takes a whole body approach, and he aims not just to treat the client's symptoms, but to educate them to become stewards of their own health. Let's hear what Dr. Jerome has to share with us today. Dr. Jerome, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me.
My podcast is about finding out the different things that affect weight loss and going beyond exercising more and eating less. And so how has your path through your training in school and in your past as being a personal trainer, how has that led to you discovering different ways that affect your weight loss other than just how much you eat and how much you exercise?
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, I'll wind the clock back a little bit. Back in about 99, I decided that I was tired of being weak, skinny, fat kind of guy. And so I ended up going on my own little journey where I put on some muscle mass. I became a personal trainer. I got healthy. I decided that there had to be more because working as a personal trainer, sometimes you end up in that whole idea of counting calories, exercise more. And it wasn't really working out. And I ended up going on to massage school, and then I became a chiropractor, and I started teaching anatomy and physiology and pathology in college level. And then I became a functional medicine practitioner. And what I can tell you is that the human body is pretty complex, and there's so much about it that we don't understand. And we have this way of just dumbing things down. And this whole calories in, calories out paradigm, I think we realize there's a whole lot more to it. And it's not that calories don't matter. It's that there's a whole lot of other things that matter probably a lot more. And that's where I come into my training as a functional medicine practitioner, is looking at everything, right? So a little bit of a story how I got to weight loss is I was working as a chiropractor, and I was only about a year out of school and becoming pretty frustrated with how I could adjust people till the cows come home, but they would show up a few days later still inflamed, or they'd feel better for a couple of days, come back, and it's back to square one. And I realized that a lot of these people needed more than just an adjustment. And I started working with people with the dietary aspects. I realized a lot of people had other chronic conditions. When they had joint inflammation, they had digestive issues, they had hormonal issues that needed to be addressed. And so working with nutrition made all the results so much better. And people would lose weight, they'd feel better about themselves, they'd be less inflamed. And my path just kind of went from there. I dove into the functional medicine training, and I've found that people really like to know a little bit more, but there's a danger of overwhelming them with too much information. And then on the flip side, there's the danger of not giving them enough information, and oversimplifying things. So so now I like to try and, as the functional medicine paradigm goes, you treat the patient, you don't treat values, you don't treat conditions, you look at the whole person, what's going on there. And so that's what I aim to do when working with weight loss.
So you said you changed from working as, chiropractic, doing the physical manipulations to nutrition. And I'll say, you know, there's no doubt that when you make that shift with people, that in many cases, the amount of calories that they're eating is going to go down. And that's the argument a lot of people are going to make. But in the cases of functional medicine and the people maybe you work with, what other aspects affect a person's health or therefore their weight, other than just how much of that food they're eating or how many calories that, you know, Big Mac had? How does that food affect their physiology, their gut, things like that?
Well, I think one of the most important things to look at when we dealing with diet is the ability for someone to control their appetite. Okay, and there's a lot of the foods in the modern culture that are just hyper palatable, right? They just processed, ultra processed foods, and they tend to keep people hungry. They don't really satisfy them. And that, I think, one of the biggest effects is just blood sugar dysregulation, and that leads to insulin resistance. And insulin is a very powerful regulatory hormone. It influences other hormones throughout the body. And I think that is one of the big things that we're looking at, you know, this idea that we're eating too many foods that aren't nourishing enough, and we keep wanting more. And it doesn't come down to calories. It really just comes down to how it influences the hormonal aspects in life. And hormones, you know, we tend to oversimplify, as I've mentioned before, and we focus on one hormone. So like everyone wants to test their thyroid, right? It must be my thyroid. And you've probably heard this too. People go in and their thyroid levels are off, so they treat the thyroid, but it doesn't lead to quicker metabolism. Weight loss. Yeah, it doesn't lead to sustainable weight loss, right? Because no hormone operates in isolation. It's like a finely tuned symphony, right? So if we just start tuning up the drums over here, the whole symphony is going to sound out of whack, right? So we've got to look at everything. And I think that becomes very, very complex. And people just want to take a pill for the ill. Unfortunately, it just doesn't really work that way. So for me, I like to look at thyroid, but I always look at thyroid in conjunction with other lab values. Especially, I like fasting insulin. I think it's a tough value to nail down, but if somebody has really high insulin, there's no way they're going to unpack fat to utilize as energy, right? And we'll use the term weight loss, but I don't really like that term, Sean, because I feel like it's misdirected. There's a lot of ways to lose weight that aren't necessarily healthy. And I like to really focus on fat loss, and I try to educate people around fat loss. And one of those things about the thyroid that is so important is that it is involved with your metabolic rate, but also protein metabolism is a big part of that. And so building and maintaining lean tissue is very, very important in the weight loss journey for anyone. And so if we starve ourselves, you know, by the calories in, calories out model, we'll tend to downregulate thyroid production over time, especially if we're in that constant caloric deficit. And that may backfire. We have a smaller engine to burn our fuel in the future. We have less muscle mass to oxidize fat. Now, fat is important, right? We need it. And it's actually a really good fuel source, but we've got to give the body a reason to unpack that fat to utilize as fuel.
Yeah, so talking about nutrition, you said fats, we need it, you know, we can utilize it. So what is the nutrition that you would recommend for someone that's trying to lose weight?
Well, you know, I'm a fan of low carbohydrate diets. I don't think you need to be there all the time. I'm not a zealot. You know, I've taught low carb keto programs. I've conducted them online. And I think the big benefit in them is to actually help the body become a little bit more metabolically flexible. So we actually can train the body to utilize fat as fuel. And that's essentially what a ketogenic diet does. I think it's really hard for some people to maintain that all the time. And that's dependent on the individual. But I would say you've always got to challenge your paradigms and challenge your body. I believe in the wisdom of nature. We see animals running around at this time of year in the fall. They're trying to pack on the fat. They're eating a lot more foods that are high fat, high carb, like acorns, and bears tend to gain all this weight. And then they go into winter, and this is where they burn off a lot of that fuel, and we as humans, we insulate ourselves in the internal environment. We never cold, we never go with the lights, we just have artificial lights. So we tend to overrun all those natural mechanisms. There's some really interesting studies that look at bears and how they become insulin resistant in the fall and how they become leptin resistant. And it's just all part of that gain weight and lose weight cycle that isn't unhealthy in the animal population. But we tend to think that that's very unhealthy in the human population. And I think that for me, coming back to your original question, looking at what people do as far as diet, I think we need to time our diets along with the seasons. So I'll use myself as an example, right? I'm Northern Anglo-European mutt. Most of my ancestry is Scottish, English, maybe a little bit Swede, Northern German, something like that. My ancestors evolved to go through really brutally cold winters where they never ate salads, they just didn't eat greens. They would have, survived on fatty fish. If they're on the coast, they would have survived on fatty mammals, They would have done that. They would have also been in the dark a lot more, probably expended a little less energy, slept more. They would have been had lower thyroid function in the winter. All of that was part of the adaptation to nature. And then spring comes around. All the animals are now lean. Some of them are running up the mountains to higher, fields of pasture or whatever. And now we're looking for different kinds of food. And maybe we are getting more of the shoots, the sprouts, the fruits, and doing that kind of thing. And then summer comes around, we have more of the fruits. We're doing different things seasonally. And I think there's an important part of adaptation that we see with hormones. We'll note the medical literature shows that more people are diagnosed as hypothyroid in the winter. But that makes sense. I mean, what's the thyroid supposed to be doing? It's driving metabolic rate. If we're more sedentary, it's darker, it's colder, we inside, we're not really going with the adaptations that nature has, we tend to create problems for ourselves. So I think for me, I like to vary diet. I love seasonal ketosis for myself. I do very, very well on it. But when the fruits are out in the summer, I'm going to eat them because they're delicious, right? And there are some indications that when we're out in the sun, we are more insulin sensitive. So we can put away more of those fruits. There's wisdom in nature. So I like to mix up diets, and I think people need to experiment with that. They need to take it upon themselves, not to listen to what somebody on the internet says or what worked for them, but to really treat themselves as an experiment and see how the body reacts to different kinds of diet.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Is everybody's different, and so somebody might do really well on a certain type of food, and their brother or somebody they know might be doing something completely opposite and still be seeing good results from that. So what other things besides nutrition? So nutrition, go with the seasons, find out what works for you. What other tips might you have for somebody that's looking to lose weight other than around nutrition?
Okay, well, I just want to touch on one other nutrition thing that I think is really important. And I think we need to prioritize protein. I think everyone needs to build a dietary pattern around protein, whether you're a vegan or a meat eater or whatever. Protein is key. Protein preserves our lean muscle mass. It preserves our bones. It is good for our hormones. I mean, most amines come from amino acids, right? So we have dopamine and all these kinds of things. These are important. And so your body can manufacture some of these, but if we're in a protein deficient state or a carb overfed state, we don't tend to get enough protein. And I think that is a bad thing for a lot of individuals because protein can trigger muscle synthesis at a certain kind of rate. And most of us are pretty sedentary, right? I mean, not all of us work in the fitness industry like you. So a lot of people, even if they work out an hour a day and spend the rest of the day sitting down, are pretty sedentary. So they need to stimulate muscle synthesis, and we can do that through protein, especially as we age. I mean, there's some indications now, there's some papers on PubMed that you can follow where they're advocating as people age, they increase their protein intake. You know, the 0.8 grams per kilogram that the Food Administration recommends, you know, to avoid deficiency and optimize growth and all of that. That's great in a young, metabolically healthy individual. But there's now studies that are pushing for 1.2 grams per kilogram to 1.6 grams per kilogram for the aging population, because we're more anabolically resistant as we age. So we need help in building and maintaining lean muscle mass and bone mass and all of that, because that's really, really important in aging. I'm now 48, so I work more with individuals who are my age and aging, and I feel like that is an important key to drive home for them. It's like, we got to prioritize protein now more than ever, you know. So I did want to say that one part about diet before we move on.
Yeah.
So the other aspects is just, you know, the whole eat less, move more kind of paradigm. It comes from the chicken or the egg kind of argument, you know, because I think there are a lot of people, might have to edit that out, sorry. There are a lot of people who are noticing that, yeah, people are eating a lot of very hyperpalatable foods. They're probably eating too many calories, and they're probably sitting around too little. But just because that's associated with the problem, doesn't mean that reversing that is the solution, right? Just because people don't move much doesn't mean that just moving a whole lot and eating less, is the solution. So we see this with thyroid issues, and you may have witnessed this with some of your patients. They'll go on like super low calorie intake, exercise and exercise and exercise, and that tends to create some issues. So the calories in, calories out model, it has its place in our society's mind, but just because people are eating too much and moving too little doesn't just mean reversing that and eating less and moving more is the solution. They've set themselves up to be insulin resistant. They've set themselves up to be leptin resistant. And these, as I mentioned, have an effect on other hormones. So we'll see a lot of people hypothyroid. So we need to address how to become metabolically healthy again. And I think it starts with the real food. It starts with kind of understanding what's going on with your hormones. And it also starts with, you know, understanding that we don't need to eat all the time. I think that's crucial. I'm an advocate for playing around with fasting as well, but I don't think it's for everyone, okay? It depends on the individual. But we shouldn't be stuffing food in our mouths all the time, because that is how we become insulin resistant. That is how we become leptin resistant. The idea of 3 meals a day and 3 snacks, I think if you look at the history of that, it's very, very recent. I think a lot of it's funded by industry, this idea that we need snack foods and carry them around with us all the time. And there's a lot of power to being hungry, and that will influence a variety of hormones. And we can then start to become more insulin sensitive. We can become more leptin sensitive, and that will control our appetite. It will control our metabolism in so many different ways.
Yeah, so about the secrets that you're hiding from me, you're keeping the secrets. So anything around lifestyle that you would recommend for people that are trying to lose weight?
Oh yeah. Okay. One of the big things is sleep, man. It is truly a pillar of our health. And we see that people have problems controlling appetite when they lack sleep. We know that people have a hard time with impulse control when they're in a tired state. We know that people are more anxious, they're more depressed when they are tired. And a lot of people will self-medicate with, you know, because of that. So they'll reach out for pleasurable foods because they are tired or they feel like they need a pick-me-up. So sleep is crucial to controlling a lot of hormonal things throughout the body, right? So our hormonal balance is dependent upon sleep. There's a reason why we sleep for about a third of our lives. It is super important. And so I think that is my probably number one lifestyle tip. Try and get entrained with that circadian rhythm, looking at when the sun comes up, when the sun goes down. Don't spend hours and hours and hours under artificial light after it's already dark outside, because that messes with a lot of hormones in the body, right? And anyone can do that Google search and find out that there's plenty of studies to look at that. And, there's an institute called Salk Institute, and they are an institute that looks at circadian biology, looking at how the rhythm of nature is synced in with daylight. And we see a lot of hormonal influences there. So I think that is key, is that people need to get good sleep, and they need to be asleep before midnight and not waking up in the middle of the day. So that is one lifestyle factor. Okay, so I think that is important. I think for a lot of people, exercise becomes a dirty word. It's like exercise has become this huge thing over the last several generations, or the last couple of generations, right? I mean, gyms didn't pop up on every corner. There weren't exercise fitness studios everywhere. And people were relatively metabolically healthy, and in comparison to now, a lot more slender. So it's not we lack exercise, but we lack movement, okay? And so I encourage people just to move. If you don't move, walking is a good place to start. It's a good time to get out in fresh air, get some sun in the face, exposure to the elements. You can walk in winter and be cold. It's good for your thermogenesis, right? You're going to generate more body heat. So I think that we need to just not think so much about exercise as something that we have to do, but movement is something that we get to do, because this body is amazing, right? We've got all these joints, they're designed to move. And we know that movement is good for your metabolism. It's good for your hormonal health. So, sleep and movement is key. I think timing of meals is really, really important. So we look at what we eat, but we don't necessarily think about when we eat, and we don't think about how we eat, and even why we eat. People have different reasons why we eat. Some people eat to lower their cholesterol levels. Some people eat to lose weight. Some people eat for performance. Everyone has a different reason to eat. So I think that's important to acknowledge. And you got to look at why you're eating before you start to think about what you should eat. When you should eat, that whole circadian biology thing, they reckon that you shouldn't be eating right away. You wake up, give your body a little bit of time to adjust. Your metabolic fire to handle food, your digestive capacity is better like an hour and a half after you wake, and it probably peaks in that early part of the evening, and then your metabolism for digesting food and breaking it down kind of goes down. That's part of the circadian biology. So the whole idea of intermittent fasting, I really think it's better to think about time restricted eating and just restricting your time to putting food in your face. Don't fast for 12 hours a day. I mean, that's an easy enough thing, don't eat from 7 in the evening till 7 in the morning, and you'll be more metabolically healthy than someone who's eating for 15, 16 hours a day. You got to give your body time to take a break, and that will enhance your leptin sensitivity. It will be better for your insulin levels. So that's a good one too. And so I tend to ramble. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's good stuff. So you started the interview saying that this is the human body is very complex, and you can see just by what you said so far, the things that affect our health and our weight, from exercise and moving to nutrition, to the time you eat, to the getting sun, and, all these different things that affect our health and our weight. And so not saying that calories don't affect or don't play into that equation, and are not important, but there's so many other factors that you have to think about and be aware of. And like you said, number one being sleep. I mean, there's so many things, there's so many aspects around sleep that if you're not getting that sleep, then the amount of food you eat becomes less and less important, and the amount of sleep that you're getting is becoming more and more important, because your body is absolutely required to have a certain types and quantity of sleep. Yeah. And so very important, very important aspects. There's so many different things that affect your health and your weight. And so that's why I wanted to have you on here, because you have so many aspects that you focus on as a functional medicine practitioner. Can you tell us about what that is and how that's different from maybe a traditional MD?
Well, yeah, so I think, modern medicine as we know it has its place, right? Treating infection, dealing with acute illness and all of that. I'm not discounting the importance of that. I think it definitely has its place. But
Yes.
we're not equipped to deal with chronic illness in that model. And having insurance in hospitals and urgent care is taking care of things that are chronic lifestyle problems. It's probably the wrong place for that to be in. And I think that's why we see a lot more people getting involved in functional nutrition and health coaching and all that, because we know it's about your lifestyle, that affects so much more. I think that there's a lot of internet memes. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. It's all about food wars these days. And everyone's like talking about what diet is best. But I look back at my grandfather who died when he was like 94, and he ate, he was pretty simple on what he ate and all of that kind of stuff. He moved daily. He never ever thought about what he should or should not be eating, because he just ate real food, And I think that's very, very important to acknowledge. We need to stop picking on food and start looking at everything. So when functional medicine, we don't treat an ill with a pill. You don't come in and say, oh, my thyroid levels are off, give me thyroid medication. That's a Band-Aid approach, right? We want to look at everything that influences it. What are you doing in your life that is influencing your hormones? So it's very, very important in a functional medicine approach to look at the individual and not treat a condition, and certainly not chase a symptom around with pills. We got to just step back and say, okay, who are you? Let's look at all the pillars of health and look at sleep and look at your movement and look at your environment, look at your thoughts, your emotions, all of that kind of stuff, because it matters so much, especially when people are trying to get healthy.
Yeah, so a lot of people nowadays, though, they want the quick fix. I mean, they're going after the lose 10 pounds in a week diet, or the pill that's going to make them lose weight, or the pill that's going to make their symptom go away. Why is that not only the best choice, but how can that be harmful in the long run for those people?
Well, I do think that it becomes a mindset where we start to feel like it's not my responsibility. I took those pills. It doesn't work, right? And I think we have to really look at, it's tough because it becomes so much of a mental aspect for people, where they identify as a certain way and they become desperate to change things, but they don't know where to start. And I think that we are marketed to constantly through this idea that this food product can help you lose weight. I mean, that's just kind of silly. Eat more to lose weight? Well, there's some problems with that, especially if it's like promising a quick fix. This whole idea of superfoods is marketing, and I think there's a lot of supplements that are marketed that way, take this supplement to stoke your metabolism. The problem is we're going to influence other things that are part of you downstream. And if we're not looking at what's going on there, we don't know what effects you're doing. So a lot of diet pills are thermogenic, they raise your heart rate. If you go on and look at the problems with the supplement industry, most of the weight loss supplements are the ones that have the most fraudulent products in them. They have dangerous medications that have been slipped into them because they'll get results, right? We'll help you burn up your fat. We'll help you, it's diuretics, it's all sorts of stuff that aren't going to lead to long-term change. As soon as you stop taking the pill, you're back to where you were. And if you've just suppressed your appetite through a pill, you've burnt up some of your lean body mass. Now your engine's smaller, right? So when we start eating normally again, we're just not going to burn that fuel. So I think that the whole pill for the ill idea is is something that we really, really do have to address. And I see it all the time in my practice. I'll have people who've come to me with garbage bags full of supplements. And I'm like, do we even know what half the stuff is doing to you? No, but so-and-so told me I needed, or I heard on a podcast that I needed the stack, or, this blogger recommended this, and they're just taking a ton of supplements. And my goal is to get people off as many supplements as possible. There's some key things that you need to take for certain periods, but you shouldn't be dependent on those. It's tough. It's a mentality. It's all about consumption. It's like, what more can I add instead of let's simplify? What can you subtract? What can we take out to keep my life more simple? And I'll usually see better results that way instead of just trying to add more things. I mean, tons of people have supplement graveyards. You go into the kitchen, you open up the cupboard, it's like, oh, what's this stuff? And like, oh, that expired in 2015. Good thing you got it, right? And you spend $500 more per month on supplements, and where's it gotten you? So you got to watch out for that.
Yeah, it seems like we're always looking for that little edge to help us lose a little bit more weight or be a little bit more healthy. Yeah. And rarely are you going to find it in a pill. And it's usually something basic, but we want to kind of avoid the basic because it seems too obvious, or it's just something that we aren't willing to dive into, like getting more sleep, like putting down the phone, getting enough sleep, and drinking enough water and simple stuff like that we just kind of, there's got to be something better than just drinking a little bit more water and getting sleep. I'm going to try this pill. I'm going to try this diet. Exactly. And so people run into problems that way. But Dr. Jerome, thanks for being on the show. Is there any last words that you, if someone came to you and they were trying to lose weight and they maybe failed in the past, any words of advice that you would give them? Where do they start? That's what you said. You said that, people just don't know where to start. Where should someone start when they're maybe overweight, tried to lose weight in the past and failed? Where should they start with that, Dr. Jerome?
It's a tough question to unpack, right? Because every individual is coming in with their own situation. But I would say, think of yourself as a natural being, right? What do natural beings do? We'd eat natural foods. We should engage with nature. We should follow natural rhythms. That is how nature stays healthy. Okay, we put ourselves in these boxes, artificial light, like I have glaring in my face, curtains shut, watching blue screens all the time. It's not optimal. So try and optimize your surroundings first by syncing with nature as much as you can. And then, I would say definitely seek out some help with somebody who is clued into hormonal function. Look at that. Don't isolate hormones. Look at the big picture. Don't just take a pill for doing that one thing. So I think people do need direction. I think that's what we are as people who work in the health industry, is that we are coaches and guides, but our job is to help people understand how things affect them. And so whoever is your doctor needs to be educating you and needs to encourage you to experiment, to learn for yourself, and to try new things. Because just trying the same approach over and over again, you ran half marathons last year and you didn't lose weight, so run full marathons this year is not going to work, right? So we got to just look at the holistic approach and think of yourself as a natural being living in a natural world if you want natural health. Otherwise, you will be living on pills for the rest of your life and probably won't be optimally healthy.
That's an awesome answer. I love it. You're a natural being living in a natural place. Yeah. And if you want results, that's probably where you need to be. And Dr. Jerome, thank you for being on the podcast today.
All right. Thank you, Sean.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dr. Jerome. If you have studied health or have listened to any other experts on this podcast, then you will begin to see a trend. And that trend is the idea of getting back to nature. If you want to improve your health or lose weight or reduce pain, you have to address the fundamentals of health. Diet, sleep, hydration, movement, fresh air, and sunlight are the foundational principles you must address if you hope for safe, effective, and sustainable health and vitality. Hopefully you are picking up some information to improve your health and weight loss on this podcast. There is another area that is foundational to health, and that is things like community and relationships. That is why I created the WHAM Fam. The WHAM Fam stands for the Weight Loss and Muscle Building Family, and is the free membership over at calorieconundrum.com. This membership gives you access to podcast transcripts, bonus interviews, free webinars, free health and fitness challenges, special discounts, and access to the free WHAM Fam Facebook group. I hope you will join our weight loss and muscle building family. And with that said, this is Coach Strick saying thanks for listening, and remember, when calories in, calories out doesn't work, that, my friend, is a calorie conundrum.
This podcast, including Coach Strick and guests, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects for the use of any information contained herein. Coach Strick and/or guests may recommend products or services in which they have a direct or indirect financial interest. To find out more, please visit www.calorieconundrum.com.